I'm sitting here with Michael Gault, who is the owner of A to Z Home Inspections. And Michael is a professional home inspector, but he does something a little different than most home inspectors in our marketplace. So I'm gonna let Michael talk about it, why he uses it, and what he has found while using it. Michael?
The technology Dave's talking about is it's a thermal imagery camera. This is a Fluke TIR32 building diagnostics thermal imaging camera. And what it does is allows you to see variations in temperature, very, very small, to the degree that I can see studs in the wall, I can see the drywall nails, I can see in many cases omissions of installation. For insulation, I can see leaks because water, even at the same relative temperature, has a lower thermal mass, and you can see that with the camera. Of course, that has to be verified by a probative or non-probative moisture meter, but it's very revealing. It can show you things that you can't normally see. In many instances, there are organizations who think that it goes above the standards of a visual home inspection. If you can see a leak that has not yet created a stain, I think that's a good thing. But many people disagree with it, and it's a very expensive technology, so a lot of guys won't go out and spend $9,000 on a camera. But it's a super tool. I use it for every home inspection. One of the more common things you find is, of course, leaks, water that has not yet stained, and large portions of ceilings that haven't been insulated. There's been I found one this week on Monday in new construction on Wilkes Way. The rough ends put in the HVAC ductwork and the plenums, and then the drywallers go in and drywall over it, poke a hole in the drywall, and then somebody comes in and cuts a hole and puts a register over it. And I found one this week that was drywalled over. And I was doing an inspection with another realtor about a year ago in a new construction home where we found two of them in a house that had been drywalled over. So it's a really good technology. It's very low impact, but very thorough, and it's super good at catching things that you're not going to normally see. So
There was one example that West Ashley, you found a termite mound.
Yeah.
One of my clients it was a termite mound.
Well, because the cassette or the colony of termites within the wall keeps a lot of moisture in there to keep their little bodies moist. And in fact, you would think that would show up as a big cold spot. And in many instances, a leak under a window presents as a big cold area that kind of looks like a downward kind of funnel underneath the window. But in this instance, it was slightly warmer because of the mass and the movement and the friction caused by the bodies of the termites in the cassette. You could see it with the thermal imaging camera. That happened again to me in another house with a realtor back on the Isle of Palms, Ron Davis, now deceased, many years ago. When I first got the camera, we found termites in the house. And it's a kind of a funny story because he came in with a ball peen hammer or a framing hammer, just started whacking chunks out of the wall. He goes, it's got to be fixed anyway. So he just tore it open, and there it was, termites in the wall. But yeah, it's a super non-invasive, but very easy to understand what you're seeing, very easy to report the findings that you see, and super believable.
So when you find things, how do you put it in your report?
Well, I usually include, this camera takes a picture called IR Fusion, and it's basically a picture within a regular photograph of the area of concern that's thermal imagery. So it shows the area, and then you take another picture, what I call the white picture without the thermal imaging interposed. You take that picture with a regular camera, and then you can see the area of you can identify the area of concern, and then you can see the image that I see with the thermal. And then in many instances, I'll go back with a moisture meter and put it on there and take a picture of that, showing that it's way higher than normal drywall, evidently a leak. So,
but you actually put photos of that
yeah,
in the report.
I include those in the report, and I include a pretty detailed description of where it is. And in the case of overlooked registers, I poke a hole with an ink pen in the drywall of the ceiling so they know where to find it.
Right. So you have when you go and do your inspection, you have a system in place.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think when I see you do that, you always run the water in sinks and open up the doors. Is that right?
Yeah. Back in the old days before thermal imagery, I used to leave paper towels underneath the P-traps in the vanities of the sinks and the kitchens and stuff like that. And then I would run all the water. You got to make sure hot's on the left, cold's on the right. run all the water, do all that stuff as you're going through the rooms, checking light switches, outlets, windows, doors, locks on the doors, hinge stops, those kinds of things. And then drain all that stuff. And then when you come back with the thermal imagery, now I just look underneath the P-trap, take a picture of the hot P-trap with no big blue drips underneath it. And yeah, hopefully. Well, I had one that had a leak in the right-hand side of a Jack and Jill vanity yesterday that had a big blue drips underneath it. And they, so it's very telling for that. But yeah, the process is the same in every house. So as you go in, you got things you got to do in every room that you're in. And in the rooms that involve water, you got to run the water. You got to make sure you got adequate water pressure. You got to make sure that everything, if you got a sprayer head, that it works, those kinds of things. I stop up sinks, fill them up to a certain degree, then drain them, make sure the stoppers work on the vanities, and then that's what leaves the hot water in the P-trap at the end so that I can see if there's any leaks below it or not.
So how long have you been using it, the Fluke?
I first got this camera, I want to say I became level 1 and 2 IR certified back in 2014. Okay. So it's been 9 years.
Right.
And I mean, the technology's advanced quite a bit. This camera's now down around $6,900 when I paid $9,000 for it. But yeah, it just, as soon as it came out, I went to get level 1 certified. And the reason I bought this camera, this particular camera, not this model of camera, not this one, but the guy teaching the class had this camera and he held it out at arm's length and dropped it and it bounced around on the floor. He goes, there's not too many of them that are tough enough for this. I said, well, if I'm going to buy one, I want one, please don't drop it. But if you want to use it, you're welcome to use it. But I don't worry about kids dropping or anything like that. And it's kind of a sidebar, but it's really funny when you have kids at an inspection and you can get a little kid to back up against the wall, put his head, and then he walks away from the wall and you take a picture of his little ghostly image walking. And parents go, are you going to send me that picture too? I go, of course I will. I'll send all that to you. But it's just a very telling technology, and it's super accurate. There's no display of false information. You see cold, you see hot. That's all you see with the camera is temperature differences. So it has a tendency to work better when the temperature outside is either considerably hotter than inside or considerably colder than inside. When the temperature differential is less than 10 degrees or so, if it's 75 outside and 68 in the house, you don't see as well in the walls. You don't see the transmission of heat through the drywall, through the studs, which is more of a direct transfer than through the air. You don't see it as well on the surface of the drywall with the thermal imaging camera. But leaks can't hide. Huge areas of missing insulation can't hide. So you see those. If they're there, you see them. Well, see here you can see the framing underneath the window. You can see the framing in the wall behind the window. You can see the header across the window. You can see the cold register upstairs. That's the HVAC register. That's the header across the top of the wall. That's the framing within the wall. And then if there was a leak in that window, there would be a big blue blob underneath that window or potentially somewhere in that like that. But that's the kind of things you're looking for. Let's go upstairs and see what else there is. Hopefully there won't be anything bad. This is your house.
This is my house, yeah. I hope well, I guess, yes, I do want you to find it, but hopefully you don't find anything.
There won't be anything bad. Trade ceilings. Trade ceilings are pretty famous for having quite a bit of insulation gaps. So you'll see big cold voids. It's a good thing you made the bed today.
My wife teaches me well.
Yeah. But see how you can see the framing in the walls? I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Is it all right if I walk all the way to your bathroom?
You can. Well, that's a mess.
That's what they all are. But once it heats up, see, after we run water in the sink, we generally stop it up, make sure hot's on the left and cold's on the right. And then after we drain it, when we come back and look at it, you can see that the P-trap is somewhat warmer than the surrounding. There's the hot water line to the sink, and then there's the P-trap. And if all that stuff wasn't sitting underneath it, you could see underneath it. Let me see if I've got any pictures of leaks that we can see. Here's the ceiling register from earlier. It was running AC that day, and there's a rectangle of cold there pushing air out from underneath it. And if you poke a hole in that and cut that out, that's a ceiling air conditioning plenum that's hidden behind the drywall. And you find stuff like that a lot. It's kind of crazy. Leaks in the ceiling. These are, missing insulation.
pretty easy to see. This is a condensate line that's dripping.
Well, that's good to find.
Yeah, it was insulated, but it had gaps in the insulation. They used pieces instead of a solid piece, so it was dripping on the ceilings. And when you see that, you can say, "Hey, that looks like water," but you can't really say it's water until you put a moisture meter on it, because it could just be cold. Oh, here's a good one. This is what a normal toilet looks like, and then here's what a toilet looks like when it's plumbed to hot water. And the reason people never notice it is because they don't normally just do the toilet, right? So they normally, in a bathroom, because I run all the water and I run hot last, and then I leave and flush the toilet, if there's hot water present in the wall and the service piping, it'll end up in the toilet. And so
then it cools off by the time you...
And then, but like if you just flush the toilet, you're not going to get hot water to the toilet, because it has to pull all the way from either the tanked water heater or the tankless water heater to get there. So the line that it takes to get there is generally longer than the hot water will get there. So the only way you know that it's hooked up to hot water is by running hot water in the bathroom, and then before you leave, flush the toilet. And then if the hot water is plumbed and it's present in the wall behind the toilet, it'll fill up, and that's when you see it. But that's a little more uncommon. You see 1 or 2 of those a year, which is pretty rare. Rare enough that we're not too scared by it.
Well, thank you so much
Hey, you're more
for
than welcome for having me.
sharing your Fluke thermal imaging camera. And
TIR 32. Building diagnostics thermal
yes,
imaging camera.
I did not say the right name, but
It
thank you
is
for
a nice
sharing
one.
that.
You're very welcome.
And I appreciate what you do in the home inspection for my clients. So
All
thank
right.
you.
Well, thanks for having me over there.
Okay, take care.